15 hours and 27 minutes of football on Sunday / very, very early Monday morning, all kicked off at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium with the man who joins us right now, Rich Eisen, on the call for that Vikings-Jets game. That means, if I'm not mistaken, it's about an 8-hour time difference from here. So
yes, sir.
That ended sometime around 9 a.m. Did you take in all 15 plus hours, and what are your general takeaways, Rich, from Week 5 Sunday in the NFL?
I watched everything up until Sunday Night Football, and I even considered staying up for the first quarter of that one. But when it got delayed an hour, I hit a wall. So I saw the highlights, if you will, because again, kickoff of that game was around 2 a.m. So that one wasn't really going to happen for me. But I saw everything else, and my general sense of Week 5, it kind of felt like Week 5 Sunday kind of felt like an extension of college football Saturday, where the matchups on paper didn't feel like they had to be must see. They didn't feel like it was going to be intense. Didn't feel like it would be memorable. Didn't feel like unpredictability was lurking, but it sure did. And in the same way that we saw a bunch of top-ranked teams in college football get knocked off by unranked teams, we saw a host of unexpected results. I proffer to say the Giants winning in Seattle might have been the last straw of anybody who did survive the first month in their survivor pool. If anybody was somehow able to navigate the Patriots beating the Bengals and so on and so forth of the first 3 weeks, it was highly unpredictable. That's a kind of treetops view. But I'll start with the Vikings, who I saw in person. And my general sense of the Vikings is, why not them at this point in time? Why not them? If you think that they're still Fugazi, if you still think that they're ready to show that they're not all that, despite having seen what you saw in the first 4 weeks, or heard maybe from me in this chair and this microphone and this same setup on Friday, talking about what I heard from Kevin O'Connell in our pre-broadcast production meetings. Just take a look at the standings right now. They are 5-0. They're on their bye week. Hopefully, whatever caused Aaron Jones to be knocked out of the game on Sunday can be knocked out with a week of rest in their bye week. They'll sit back and watch the Lions take on the Cowboys. And somebody's going to emerge out of that game either 3-2 or 3-3. And if the Lions are 3-2, that means the Vikings have got a 2-game lead in division on them. And then if the Cowboys are 3-3, just take a look at some of these records right now. If you went into the season thinking that the Cowboys or the Eagles were the team to beat in the NFC right now, the Vikings have a 2 and a 2.5 game lead on them. And you take a look at the 49ers. They've got a right now 3.5 game lead on them, 5-0, and one of those wins was against them. And the Niners are now sitting at 2-3. You take a look at the NFC South, who's the world beater there? 3-2. They're 2 games ahead of them. So you look at what the Vikings have been able to do. They gutted out a win yesterday in which the offense was sputtering, certainly compared to the first 4 months of the season. And they're 5-0. There's nothing to be said about that other than you are what you are, and what they are is a well-coached, highly difficult football team to figure out, and one that now knows how to finish games positively.
Aaron Jones, on that point, my understanding is not expected to be anything long-term. They don't need to bring in another running back. We'll see. The bye week coming at the right time for him. It was pretty obvious once he had that ice pack wrapped on there, Rich, that he was not coming back in that game. But 2 weeks to get ready should be, it sounds like, good to go, if not right after the bye, shortly thereafter. I also, when it comes to the Vikings, Rich, we haven't gotten to the quote-unquote soft part of their schedule. I was asked about this a lot just from living in Minneapolis and doing local radio and whatnot. The hard part of their schedule was these first 6-7 games here, and with the state of the Rams at this point being 1-4 and being pretty banged up, the Lions, that sets up as a huge game. But you thought going into it, if they could get through those first 8 weeks of the season, 7 games being 4-3, even 3-4, they're hanging around because then they face the AFC South. It's the Colts and the Jaguars and the Titans. Nothing against any of those teams, but you'd think, those are winnable types of games. They've set themselves ahead so far. And to your broader point of why not the Vikings, I was struck by this, Rich, just in looking at the overall league standings today. Not only do we have only 2 undefeated teams with the Vikings and the Chiefs, we've only got 3 one-win teams in the entire league, or one-loss teams, rather, in the entire league right now. It's the Lions, it's the Commanders, and it's the Texans. Everybody else is somewhere in that 3-2, 2-3 range. There's a handful of teams that are 1-4. If you said who's the dominant team right now, I think you'd probably say it is the Vikings.
Well, you'd have to, since they're the only team currently 5-0. The Chiefs may join them tonight. The Washington Commanders are another team that is really, really dangerous. They're on a roll. They have won 4 in a row. They have a quarterback who doesn't turn it over. They have a quarterback who can flip the field. And they've got a defense that's believing. And they've got a run game that is really stout. They are balanced, and they are good. And they are the best team in the NFC East. Sorry, TJ. I'll just throw it out there. It's tough to argue it, but I'm sure Cowboys fans might argue it. They're really, really good and can absolutely win that division. And who knows after that? They are physical. They are really efficient, and they are mistake proof almost. It feels like whenever Daniels turns it over, it just feels weird, which is wild for a rookie. The Bears coming into London off of their best game. This one felt better than the previous game in which Williams threw for 300 yards. This one was on rhythm. This one involved DJ Moore a couple times. This one has the run game beginning to start really punching it through the line of scrimmage and the end zone. They're coming in with a nice head of steam, taking on a Jaguars team that did finally get on the board. So there's that. And, and in the NFC West, the Seahawks with a shocking loss at home to a Giants team that was out without Malik Neighbors and without Devin Singletary. You got to give it up to them on a big-time Stones win in the Pacific Northwest. The 49ers, there just seems to be something missing, and it's not just McCaffrey. There seems to be a killer instinct that's missing, quite frankly. And when the 49ers begin to have trouble closing games, that's where you're kind of, furrowing your brow and wondering where a loss like the one against the Cardinals at home comes from. I'm not ready to obviously throw this one out yet and throw it on an Overreaction Monday pod that Chris and I have already recorded. It's coming out shortly if it already hasn't, because they take on the Seahawks next to kick off Week 6 on Thursday Night Football. That's a pretty damn huge football game. And guess what? They win that one, they'll be in first place at 3-3. Same thing with the Jets on Monday Night Football, winning a Week 6 finisher against the Bills. They'd be in first place, which is another reason why I'm also not worried about the Bills as well. And if I may transition to the AFC here, Tom, let me hit this. The Chiefs, we all know, are the class of the league because they're 2-time defending champs, and until they lose, I'm going to keep them atop my power rankings at this point in time. But we'll see. We'll see. I'll have a couple of days to think about that for Wednesday. But the Texans are for real. I think we can state that. They're not curb stomping too many people, but they're beginning to win games that they're in trouble in and surviving. I know a lot of folks think the Bills helped them out. If you actually took a look at the end of that game between the Bills and the Texans and took a look at what the Bills did clock management style with about 30 seconds to go inside their own 5-yard line and how they threw it 3 times, the only pushback I would give to their play calling would maybe to run it once. Run it once. You click a couple of seconds off so you know if you're going to throw it 2 more times. If you throw it 2 more times and your guy Allen isn't going to put it in any dangerous spot, you're going to give a shot for Allen just to get out from under his own goal line and get another shot at maybe getting a 60-yard field goal to win it. You run it one more time, then you can get to a point where if the Texans get it back, they're not going to have any time to gain any yards except for the fact of kicking a field goal at the end of the game. It wouldn't be too far off the 2 seconds they had left on the clock if you ran it 3 times and forced them to call all 3 timeouts. You would have just forced Houston into a situation where they would have to throw it to the sideline instead of over the middle to get the game-winning field goal for Fairbairn. So, I know it brings up the Bills are in trouble police or the rabble-rousing of the Bills are in trouble because they got blown out in one game and they're bugaboo. This is the team that blew a 12-second advantage for them to actually vanquish the Chiefs at home. And this plays into their clock management issues of the McDermott era. But it wouldn't have been really too far off, even if they had ran it 3 straight times. That said, the Bills are still in first place in the AFC East, 1 game ahead of a Jets team that's still struggling to find itself on offense and a Dolphins team that is just waiting for Tua to hopefully come back clear-headed. And the Ravens have now stepped forward and raised their hands and say, we're kind of the same team, if not better, because Derrick Henry's jamming it down your throat. What a game that was. The Bengals can't stop anyone on defense, and that is what's particularly troubling about them right now, because Burrow and Chase are clicking. And the Ravens just pulled one out. They got a little bit lucky, but you have to be lucky as well as good. And Lamar Jackson is turning it up, and we're not having the same questions we had on opening night or after the first couple of weeks of how are they going to work Derrick Henry, and do they have the answer on offense with Derrick Henry in their scheme? That is all asked and answered, and as long as they stay healthy, they're going to have a nice long run in the AFC this year. And that's my week 5 overview with both conferences.
My thoughts on the Ravens is with Derrick Henry, there's so many times where the expectation level is set so high on a free agent, and by and large, free agents don't meet that expectation. With Derrick Henry, we're seeing him play like absolute prime Derrick Henry, and all the questions about, okay, they're primarily a pistol shotgun team. How's that going to work for a guy who's used to having a head of steam hitting the line? The answer is it's worked great. It looks fantastic right now. They still need a botched hold to win that game. But as Joe Burrow said, afterwards, they're not a championship caliber team right now. The Bengals are not playing consistently at the level that they need to when it comes down the stretch. I mean, that's a very talented, at least on offense, Bengals team right now that is 1-4. They're beat up on defense. They just lost Dax Hill now to a season-ending injury. Their defensive tackles have all been out. They've been extremely banged up on that side of the football. But you're right. They can't get off the field. When it comes to the Bills and that late game situation, I thought that was kind of a microcosm of a trend that we're seeing, which is that teams are being more aggressive in those situations than maybe ever before. We've seen Kevin O'Connell doing it with the Vikings too, where late in games, keep throwing. That's your best weapon. In their case, it's Sam Darnold throwing to Justin Jefferson. In the Bills' case, we got one of the best players on the planet in Josh Allen. Let him try to finish off the game. Now, having said that, you certainly can look and go, maybe you could throw a more high percentage pass. I don't know that running a deep fade one-on-one on the sideline to Keon Coleman is necessarily the highest percentage type of play that you have. I don't sit back and say that this is necessarily the wrong approach. It's definitely an aggressive approach. But, your best case scenario is, all right, you get, if you run the ball 3 times, unless you break one and get a first down, you're still playing for overtime. They're thinking, we might be able to play for a long field goal and win this game in regulation. But you're right. There's a certain coterie of people who think that the Bills are perpetually teetering on the brink of falling apart. We haven't seen it yet. They didn't finish that game off. And back to your original point, Rich, with the Texans, they have looked really good. They've finished off these games. I was at the one game they didn't win this season, and it's when those Vikings absolutely took it to them. And that was not close. That was a bad game. That was total domination by the Vikings. So maybe the best case for the Vikings being the dominant team in the league, besides the fact that they're 5-0, is that they beat one of the other teams that looks really good. And, probably planted some seeds in the back of Jets fans' heads early yesterday morning about whether or not they're going to be able to pull out of what they've had going these last couple of weeks with or without, I don't know, a 7-time Pro Bowl receiver who potentially could be headed to New York.
Well, before we break, on the other side of that, I want to talk about the Jets and Vikings game through the prism of Davante Adams. I mean, so far, the running back debate that we had all off season. I'm a table pounder of the first variety, as you know, that running backs deserve to get paid because they're the ones who are always leaned on in a big moment, in a big game, to get a first down, to get something done, to balance an offense, to close a game out, to flip a field. And there's a little bit of something in there for everyone in the first 5 weeks. And by that, I mean, you take a look at the top 5 rushers in the NFL right now. 3 of them are the 3 free agents: Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, who's even in the top 5 having a week off, and also Josh Jacobs. And the other 2 are people that you could, say, listen, you don't need to be paying someone very highly to be a difference maker from the spot. Jordan Mason and Chuba Hubbard are the others in the top 5. I'm just going to say it's still too soon to make a case for either one or the other as having won the argument. But right now, ask the Baltimore Ravens what a difference maker Derrick Henry is making on this team right now, and how more one-dimensional they might be waiting for Keaton Mitchell to get back healthy with Justice Hill, or maybe Gus Edwards might still be on the team if they had made that decision, and how different they would be in digging out of an 0-2 hole right now instead of being 3-2. What about when the Eagles come back with Saquon? And obviously, Josh Jacobs helped the fact that the Packers are now 3-2, despite Jordan Love being 0-2. So prior to now 1-2. It's just something to keep an eye on right now. And it's fascinating that somebody's going to be 31 as the most dominant guy in the league at the position. And I think that I'm going to be proven correct by the end of the day.
I think that even to add on to that too, Rich, you have the reigning MVP of the entire NFL in Lamar Jackson on that roster. And he did some freaky stuff again yesterday, extending plays, almost falling down and still, scrambling and throwing a ball across his body. You could also make a good case that the MVP of the Ravens right now is not even Lamar Jackson. It is Derrick Henry because of that additional element that he has brought to the table. All right, let's take a quick break here.
If I'm not mistaken, Tom, you're referring to the Lamar Jackson play where it looked very unlikely he would throw a touchdown pass, and then it was a very likely touchdown pass. Thanks. I'll be here all week.
Glad you got that in. Glad we got that one in, Rich. More of that type of insight.
Tomato.
I'm well rested. I'm well rested.
That's how much joy you brought me yesterday during that game.
How's that?
You know why. You know what you did.
Because G-Reg Zerillion added
what did G-Reg
kick one off or made an extra point?
Yes.
G-Reg Zerillion?
Yes, it took a while.
G-Reg Zerillion.
It took a while for them to get up on the board, but I was just sitting there like,
listen, the Jets received and then did not get a first down until the second to last drive of the half.
Yeah.
So we weren't seeing G-Reg, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And I knew, I'd be saying something a lot of people might not understand, but that was for you boys and for our audience that knows.
Well, for the audience, I got a lot of tweets
about
it.
For the amount of people who have consumed that video, a lot of people got G-Reg, what he was up to.
That's for all of us. That's an us thing.
Well,
you know what I mean?
The best thing about us is that it's about us.
That's true. It's right.
Let them know, Mike.
G-Reg.
Yeah. Also, how did you consume the games yesterday?
It's about us.
With the 8-hour time difference, how are you watching games yesterday?
As soon as we were done, we went to a conference room here in our hotel that we're all staying at in downtown London, and they hooked up the red zone. So,
nice.
You have never experienced.
You got Octobox.
You have never experienced a witching hour until you've been in London.
So the witching hour would have been like 9 o'clock last night, right?
It was the witching hour.
8:30?
I think this town is on its second millennium of witching hours. Don't you think? This might be the original witching hour here. Took place in the UK.
No doubt about that.
So that's how we kept up on it. Witching hour. Octoboxes and more. You're welcome.
Welcome back to the Rich Eisen Show. Tom Pelissero in for Rich, who joins us right now from London, fresh off the Jets-Vikings game yesterday, heading into a Bears-Jaguars tilt this coming Sunday. Rich, as we bring you back into the conversation, I want to dive a little bit more into the Jets, but first, I want to play a little bit of what Aaron Rodgers had to say after that loss yesterday.
I mean, they all hurt. Just got to be, honest with your performance every single week and hold yourself to a standard. Obviously, that was below my standard. I just found out I've never thrown 2 picks in the first quarter before. So that's a first. One of us cost, obviously, 7. And the other, could have cost 3. So in a game where you lose by 6, plays like that are exponentially highlighted. So 3 turnovers for me is definitely out of character, and I'm disappointed.
I was thinking last night, Rich, because obviously a lot of the conversation surrounding the Jets right now also is attached to the idea of a Davante Adams trade, which, based upon what we talked about yesterday on the NFL Game Day kickoff show, other teams involved in this think today or tomorrow, these 24 to 48 hours, this thing may well come to a head and Davante Adams might have a new team. Adams would like to be a New York Jet. The Jets certainly have a level of interest. The question I was asking myself was, would adding Davante Adams fix what ails the Jets? And
let me answer that question for you.
Please do.
Because that is the ultimate question, is it not? And what I think ails the Jets right now is an offense that is still learning how to operate in Rodgers' world. And, while Rodgers is learning to operate in a world in which he's 40. And that is occasionally making things tougher, where the easier throws aren't connecting. And it makes it tougher in terms of Rodgers recovering from a beating like he took in Denver, and one that he suffered. I honestly thought when he went down right there, and we could see on the replay where he was screaming as his leg was caught under a group of Vikings who were all over him all day. I thought he was done. I thought he was done for the day, not, running out. And, I kind of made a little light of it by saying, like Monty Python, he's not dead yet here in England. And then he comes out, and the Jets use a very questionable roughing the punter penalty, although Gene Steratore came on our broadcast to say any time that somebody contacts the plant leg, that is going to be a penalty, and a 15-yarder, as a matter of fact. And the Jets utilize that to go down the field and make a game of it. But that said, Davante Adams coming in would be another voice in the Jets receiver room other than Rodgers's, to tell them this is where this offense requires you to be. This is where it requires you to be at a certain time. It's a timing offense. You got to be open at a certain time. If you think you're not open, don't worry. I'll throw you open. I'll back shoulder you here. I'll lead you away from the defense there. Against the Broncos, the drive that the Jets were driving to try and win the game, there was a crucial moment where Rodgers threw it, and Garrett Wilson's head hadn't been turned yet. Yesterday, the final interception that Stephon Gilmore collected to make it a trifecta for the Vikings defense that looked terrific. Once again, Mike Williams hadn't turned his head, but Gilmore had. So those are things that I think Davante Adams can show the way on, and it's a voice other than Rodgers's. And then, Rodgers is dealing with just knowing that there'll be certain times where he thinks he can sometimes leave the pocket, can't. Stepping up, sometimes he can do that. I mean, the number of times Kurt Warner kept saying during the broadcast, his arm's just fine. That arm looks just as the Rodgers we've always seen before. So putting that all together, I think Davante Adams can absolutely help on that front. No question about it. And we asked Rodgers about it in our pre-broadcast meeting, and he essentially said that there is a premium on having somebody who knows the practice and how to practice and what the schedule is. And I can tell you this, Rodgers adores Garrett Wilson. He targeted him 20 times. He caught 12 passes. But the Vikings were just the better team yesterday, man. And they were the better team yesterday. And that was after losing Aaron Jones. And their offense became more one-dimensional. And Sam Darnold didn't have that magic touch where he's throwing touchdowns like Oprah's giving away cars. But when it came down to it, he stepped back. He made some great throws. One to Jefferson, one to Munt, his tight end. And that helped put them up by 6. And then the defense shut the door. And that's why I guess we're coming full circle here. They're 5-0, and they are a really hard 5-0. Although 2 of their wins are against AFC teams, and that for tiebreaker purposes really doesn't help them in the long run. It's more of the NFC teams that they've beaten. And they beat the Giants, who, that looks like a more quality win now, doesn't it? And the 49ers, who are also 2-3. And we could see what they did against Green Bay at Green Bay. I mean, they are already 3-0 in conference. And 2 of the teams that they beat in conference are teams that a lot of people thought could win the Super Bowl this year. One of them is the golden victory, which is to win a division game on the road. And they sit on a bye week and again, Detroit comes back and can have an opportunity, the Vikings to vanquish them at home and do the whole skull chant in Minnesota as opposed to in UK. It was a very impressive win for the Vikings, and I'm not just adding all that because all Vikings fans think that I'm a biased SOB. Even though as you know, I've been laying that groundwork for weeks on our show. I said I would give anything for a 1-score game at the end, and it didn't look like we were going to get that at 17-0. But we did at the end, and it was a big-time win for the Vikings, and I hope people were enjoying the broadcast all the way up to kickoff of the 1 o'clock games.
When I was asking myself that question last night, Rich, about the Jets and a Davante Adams trade, where I came down to was this. Does it fix everything? No. But what I saw with Aaron Rodgers yesterday, and I've covered him almost his entire career, going back to my days at the Green Bay Press-Gazette when he's backing up Brett Favre. He threw 10 balls in that game that he was throwing to Davante Adams, that he was throwing to Jordy Nelson, that he was throwing to these guys who he's had this innate nonverbal communication with through his entire career. You're right, and Kurt's right. The arm looks fine. He could not move in that game, especially after he torqued the ankle. He also probably intellectually knows he shouldn't move a lot at this stage in his career because holding onto the ball is what got him hurt last year, because the longer he extends plays, the more shots he's going to take on a 40-year-old body. But when it came down to just snapping that ball off and the quick release and firing into tight windows, he was doing it. He threw 10 balls yesterday that were intended for Davante Adams, and the current group of Jets receivers caught 2. The ball in the end zone to Lazard, where he threads it, and it is in the exact right spot behind the defender. It's a back shoulder throw of sorts, but to the middle of the field, and it doesn't connect. He's seen Davante Adams make that play over and over and over again. It is not a quick fix for the New York Jets, but if they're able to bring in that guy, and remember, Rodgers has also talked many times about his belief that players at the end of their career can summon something, a will and a want to. I am certain he spent that flight back from London thinking we can get exactly that out of Davante Adams. You've got another week here, Rich, in London. Get ready for the game. So take me through. The teams don't get there till later in the week, right? So
the Bears are getting Bears are getting in a little early, and the Jaguars get in late because they've got another game on the other side. Just to put a bow on everything you just said, when we talked to Rodgers about Adams, I did say to him, hey, it does sound like 17 could help around here. And he looked at me and he says, Malachi Corley, because that's who's currently wearing number 17.
It was inactive.
And I'm like, no. I mean, Adams. And he did say that Adams learned from Jordy Nelson, who learned from Donald Driver, and then there was Greg Jennings before him. So, that's the point, is that Adams can maybe show the way in a way that Rodgers is attempting to, but obviously he comes in with a certain bona fides in a wide receiver room that would be valuable, and all of that stuff. But I'm here. I'll be here all week, as I mentioned earlier. and the Bears come into town, and trust me, we were all jacked up, man, that the Bears won and sort of the Jaguars. So we got improved records there, and then the Giants took one giant leap for Munich kind in winning that game. So we got that on the brain. But thanks for doing the show all last week and a couple shows this week, brother. Thank you.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.